Hi there, and welcome to today's episode where we talk with Don Gleason about living a fulfilled life. Don leverages his passion to help people find the career that energizes them and a life that fulfills them. So, fulfillment was immediately a common thread with us and with Don, what he does. He spent many, many years in the military and then years in the corporate leadership roles. And now he helps others to find their passion, to really allow them to live the lives they want to be living. So this is just such a beautiful, deep, exploratory, meaningful conversation. And I can't wait for you to listen. So let's go.
But before we carry on with our conversation, don't forget to subscribe, follow, hit those notification buttons, like anything to help us, please, to spread the word about our podcast, because we have such wonderful guests and we just want to share their wisdom and their knowledge with everyone that we can. Also, we have a newsletter where we write little bits and we get some nice information. You only get it twice a month, so you don't get inundated with it. The link is in the description below. But I think that's enough for now. How about we carry on with our really wonderful conversation with Don?
Hi, Don. How are you?
I'm fantastic. This is a great opportunity to be with you guys. And I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts where the two of you were just talking, and it's going to be fun to share some things with you guys today. So I appreciate the opportunity.
And that's exactly why we're here. We're here to share and talk and explore and learn more about ourselves and each other. So please tell us and tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself. You know, who you are, what you do, what gets you up from the bed in the morning, what mission are you here on this planet for, anything that feels interesting, relevant, inspiring for you to share with us right now.
Yeah. What gets me up in the morning is my concern for my fellow human being. And I'm 27 years U.S. Air Force, 9 years corporate. And during that time, I really learned about leadership. And I really love leading people, leading teams. And as I made that connection, I care about the people. I'm an SC on the DISC profile. We can talk more about that, but very people oriented and task oriented, but more people, but reserved. And I really care about the people. And I see in the military, we're losing 22 a day, military and veterans, to suicide. So I'm worried about that mental health piece, and the transition out of the service is one of the toughest things. But I see a similar piece on the non-military side, the corporate side, mental health, and it's leading to divorce, leading to family abuse, verbal abuse, just all kinds of things on that side. And mental health through COVID has been really tough. And I've seen that in family, I've seen it in friends. So I guess that would be the thing I would lead right away with is I'm just concerned about my fellow human and how can I help them.
And I think it's a great way to start because we
Mhm.
live through the best of times, but we also live through some of
Mhm.
the hardest of times. There's so much pressure from social media, society,
Mhm.
culture.
Oh,
You know, we are going through so many different interconnected crises in this
mhm.
world and so many different opinions. And obviously, we don't necessarily want to be political in this podcast, but we
Mhm.
are caring for human beings across the planet for our health and well-being. So, so glad to have you here to shine a bit of light to have you found something on your journey that then helps us with our human condition, with these challenges that we're coming across? Is there something that, you know, we individually, as families, as co-workers, as organizations, we could be doing to help ourselves and help our loved ones and help our world overall as well?
That's it. That's it. When and I want to ask you guys a question right away, which is fulfilled life. Because I think when you ask me that question, what have I found? I think it's having a priority of a fulfilled life. And I see that you guys use that. So I want to start up with a question for you guys. Well, how do you define a fulfilled life?
That's a good question. I think for
Mhm.
us, it's allowing ourselves to live the life we want. It's to removing some of the societal pressures, removing some of the expectations of you. We are all about not shooting ourselves. You should be like this, you should be like that, you should do this. To
Should be,
find,
yeah, like that, man.
for us, fulfilled life is to follow your path. At least for me, Natalie can speak for herself. For me, it's to follow your path, live your truth, have the impact you want to
Mhm.
have. But also for me, fulfilled life, sometimes there is so much pressure on the impact that we need to change the world, we need to help people, we need to make an impact. And sometimes like having a good life where you've had a good time, you've tried to enjoy yourself and you
Mhm.
felt good about it, it's enough.
Mhm.
Like we don't need to be more
Yeah,
than, we are already enough. So it's the mixture of enoughness, I would say, and
yeah.
authenticity, at least for me.
There's that saying we got to stop shitting all over ourselves, right? We the should. Yeah, it's interesting. How about you, Natalie? Is it the same definition?
Well, similar, but for me, it's very much. I mean, as our listeners will know, humanness is one of my
Mhm.
words that I'm passionate about. So for me, it's reconnecting to our humanness and sovereignty. It's being in control of who we are and not wanting or expecting other people to fix us, but to find our way of being who we are. And that for me is very, very important, which then connects to the humanness, but it's also about finding a way to live outside of the box, essentially, is finding what works for us as individuals, because we don't all fit into every box that's been created for us. So it's sort of stepping out of the box and finding what works. So what works for me does not work for Lenka, and what works for Lenka doesn't work for me. I mean, for at the moment, Lenka is traveling around Spain in a van, and that sounds idyllic. And I think, oh yes, I would love to do that, but it's not for me right now, and that's okay. And I think it's about enjoying somebody else's experience through them, but also then enjoying and learning what our experiences are and what we are looking for. So
That's
that
right.
for me is about finding a way to live in this world in a fulfilled way. And it is
Mhm.
also, how can we be
Mhm.
kinder to people or people
Mhm.
around us? And how can we not damage the environment more? What can
Oh
we do?
yeah.
So it's little steps. So I'm very much smaller as what can we do as
Mhm.
individuals? Because I
Mhm.
think we are each a
Mhm.
pebble that gets thrown into
Mhm.
that pond, and then it ripples out. So what
Mhm.
pebble are we throwing into this, proverbial pond, and what ripple effects are having? But for me, it's very much is about connecting to our own humanness and finding
Yeah.
ways that deals with us. So
Yeah. Oh,
we've
so
answered your question. So can we
okay.
throw that question back at you?
Please, yeah. Because my motto right now is helping people find the career position that energizes them so that they can find the life that fulfills them. So you think about what does that mean to fulfill a life, right? And I love the way you guys have put it together. And it is unique for each of us in my mind. And we have to understand ourselves before we can go find it, right? We have to think about our personality. Like I already shared, I'm a SC on the disc, right? I I have done the strength finders. I just don't remember those. I'm a disc certified disc consultant, so I'd focus in on that one. But I'm also in that SC. I love relating with people. Through my 27 years Air Force, 9-year corporate, one of the best pieces, not just in leading people, but was connecting with people, like you said. So Lenka, my daughter, millennial, mid-30s, she just renovated a van over the last couple of years, and she's now finishing her first year on the road in the US, traveling national parks, her and her puppy dog. And one thing we were really, my wife and I were really concerned was she's a very social person. How is she going to survive on the road not having that interaction? Well, she knows people everywhere. It's just amazing. And she stayed connected with them. So she goes to a town, she has dinner with somebody, she goes out to the national park, she goes to a harvest host. Yeah, are you familiar with harvest hosts? No? So it's a it's like Airbnb, right? It's an app that has connected with people with wineries, breweries, lavender fields, just places where you can park an RV for a night. You have to be self-contained. It doesn't cost you anything to park there, but they expect you to spend like $20 in the brewery, the winery, whatever, right? So it's the way they get paid for what they're doing. And she has met some of the most exciting people there. And it just fills her soul to be relating with all these different people, connecting with her friends, connecting with new people, seeing the US, hiking, being with her puppy. And that's a fulfilling life. And I think about that from a worker perspective. I think when all we do is work 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and we're so tied to that and the stress of it. And even when we go home, we're thinking about the email and we pull out that phone at the end of the night, right? The last thing we do at 9, 9:30, whenever, is we're going to spend an hour trying to make sure that any emails that came in, we respond to them, you know, and uh, and making sure that other people have responded to us. And it's like, what life is that? I was there. As I was a commander in the Air Force, it was just all consuming in fact, my predecessor, when I was a group commander, he worked from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, pretty much all day Saturday. And then he went to church Sunday and went back to the office. It's like, I talked to my wife about that and she goes, yeah, that ain't going to work for me. And I said, that's not going to work for me either. So I told the secretary, I said, I'm going home for dinner. She said, oh, so you can't. You won't have time. I said, yeah, I'm going home for dinner. I'm going to spend some time with my daughter. This is her last 2 years of high school, right? My wife and I want to do some camping. Now, we didn't get much camping done those 2 years, but we got a lot of other stuff. So finding those other things in life that light you up besides work is kind of where I'm going. I'll keep it short there.
And it's so interesting that, talking about the work-life balance and different habits, for me now being in the road in Spain and learning maybe a little bit more about the Spanish culture, Spain still
Mhm.
has the siesta. They still really, from
Mhm.
1:30 in the afternoon until 4, sometimes 5, lots of places will be closed. And when I talk with a couple people at a co-working space, they still, from the 1:30, they pick up their kids from the school, take them home, as a family have a lunch together. Sometimes
Mhm.
kids need to go back to school, sometimes they
Mhm.
don't. And then they go back to the office. So they work a little bit more locally, but I was
Mhm.
amazed by the fact that they not only go home for lunch, they take their kids away from school, so the kids
Yeah.
spend so much more time with their family. I was so interested to really learn that the siesta time of like the afternoon, when, it's technically supposed to be quite hot during the summer here, that they just, yeah, knock off and enjoy and just, yeah, rest for a little bit, have a nap.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting when we deployed. I was in the Air Force, civil engineers, we would deploy forward to set up base camps for various operations. So we deployed into Eastern Turkey and Northern Iraq in 91. Um, and it was so hot. It was 110, 115 Fahrenheit, 38 to 43, maybe. I'm guessing off the top of my head. So that's hot. And so we would take those hours off. And sometimes the other commanders would look at us and say, "What are you guys doing?" So, sir, it's just too hot this time. We're going to work well into the night, right? Be 8, 9 o'clock. We'll get those things done, but we're going to respect our people here. And and the guys came forward and they came through and they did perform very well. But they really enjoyed that we would let them out of that heat of the afternoon. Because up until then we had been outside setting up tents in that hot, blistering afternoon, just sweating like crazy. But it's so dry. It's like 4% humidity that you don't even get sweat on your shirt. It's just evaporating. You don't realize how dehydrated you get. So it was respect for people. Yeah.
I think it's finding ways that work. I mean, the last
Hmm.
50 odd years, and give or take 10 or 20 years on that one, it
Hmm.
has been, you go to work, be at your desk for 8, finish at 5, you have your lunch hour, you maybe have tea breaks, and you maybe get 10 minutes in the morning or the afternoon for a drink. But
Hmm.
essentially you're there at that time, you finish at that time, you go home at that time, Monday to Friday usually. But as you go up in the corporate world or in the military, get more and more responsibility, your days get
Hmm.
longer and longer, and it's expected that you are there at your job.
Mhm.
And as you said, your predecessor, was working pretty much 7 days a week. And it's then having to
Yeah.
step back and say, no, I'm
No.
going home, to have dinner with my wife, and because I want to spend more time with my daughter.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm ex-Navy wife, so I understand how the
Yeah.
military works. But it's about finding that way of saying, hang on a minute, no, this doesn't work for me. I know that I have to do A, B, and C, and I'll get it done. But this time is my
Mhm.
time, and it's finding the way to do it. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the advantages that we've got from COVID is a lot of people are now thinking, hang on a minute, I can work from home. I can do
Mhm.
flexi time or hybrid work. I'll spend 2 days in the office and I'll spend 3 days at home, or I'll come in the mornings and I'll do the rest at home. There was more of that flexibility. It's here in the UK, it's clamping down a bit more on that. They want you in the office. But
Same here, yeah.
with technology, you can have meetings, you can be at home in your pajamas if you want
Mhm.
to. You can be at home, you can work from home because everything is connected. I
Mhm.
appreciate not every single job is possible, but it's
Mhm.
finding people are now starting to think, hang on a minute, I'm actually going to find, you're not going to give that to me. I'm going to find a job that's going to give that to me, or
That's
that's
right.
what I'm looking for. And I think we've seen that it works, because
Mhm.
pre-COVID, it was very much, that's not going to work. No, you
Mhm.
can't do that. But it was forced on businesses,
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
has worked. And I know that there's an author, Daniel Daniel Pink, the Daniel
Oh
Pink. Have
yeah.
you heard of him?
Good guy. Yep.
He's been
Mhm.
talking about, flexi work, working from
Mhm.
home for like 20, 30 years
Mhm.
already in all his
That's right.
books. And he was like, well, are you okay up here? is
Mhm.
is is everything working upstairs, type of thing. But it's proven to work. And the thing is, when people are happier at work, they're more productive.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's finding, because I'm talking like more from military or from
Mhm.
corporate or job wise. I mean, I know when you're self-employed, you can pick and choose when and how you want to work. Um, but it's when you are told, hang, you have to be there at this time, that time you have your break, and that time you go
Mhm.
home. How do you then say, hang on a minute, can we negotiate this? Can we sort something out so that the employer is happy and the employee
Mhm.
is happy? And I guess this
That's
is
right.
where you
Two
come
together.
in, is helping to
Mhm.
have that. Let's have that discussion. Let's find, how can you help this person, but it doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily work for that person. So it's not like a
Mhm.
blanket, everybody does it. It's helping the individual. And I know we've
Mhm.
got employees as well as employers as well as self-employed people listening.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
how can in the workspace, how can people find their fulfillment
Mhm.
in their job without then necessarily having to be forced to look for something else because they're not finding it there, or maybe
Mhm.
they do need to look for something else? So what would your
Mhm.
answer be with that whole big
Oh,
open-ended question?
that is such a big question. I go back to that piece I said earlier, which is self-awareness, right? When I started with Booz Allen Hamilton after my military career, because in the military I had to be in the office. They gave us no other structure. Now, there was times when I had knee surgery, excuse me, and I worked from home for 2 weeks. I couldn't be on my knee. So I had everybody. I had this really beautiful 1894 brick quarters on this historic part of the base, and it was just beautiful. So I would invite, my team over and we would have meetings and I'd be sitting there with my knee up, right? And I could do that for about a half hour, and then I had to go lay down. And everybody respected that. When I got to Booz Allen, I talked to my boss at one point and he said, Don, you decide. All I want is that you get the job done. You need to be here when you need to be here. Be at home when you need to be at home. Get the job done. and we respect that. So I started watching and observing for a couple months, and there would be times where my three principals were gone with the vice president up into Washington, D.C., having meetings at corporate. And all of my peers, my other senior associates, they were out on their job sites. And I didn't have job sites yet. So I was like, I would drive 45 minutes to the office. I would sit there by myself all day on the phone, on the computer, very few people around. And I would go home. And I was like, well, that was kind of a waste of an hour and a half, right? But there was other times when they were all there and I needed that personal interaction. As an SC, I thrive on people, right? I'm an ambivert. I'm right in that middle of an introvert, extrovert, right? I'm actually a 49 on a 1 to 99 scale. So I need that. I need the interaction, but I don't need it all the time. So understanding myself and what it took for me to be charged, and then balancing my schedule to be able to do that, I thought was really important. And having a company what gave me the freedom to do that was good. I remember one day I had a whole bunch of stuff to do, personal and work. We were getting ready to go somewhere. I had been working hard. I needed to mow the yard. I still needed to get my workout in. So I went to the gym at 5. I got home at 7:30. I took an hour to mow the yard. 8:30, while I was cooling down, jumped inside the house and I got on the phone call with people at work and we talked through things that I had been thinking about, and working on. And we had a meeting for an hour. Then I got off and showered and had another meeting. And I was able to work all of those things. And I got home, my wife got home that night from different activities and she says, how'd you get all that done? I said, because the company gave me the freedom, right? And it works. Now, I think the second part of that is companies need to be honest with themselves. What do they really need? Because it's interesting, we came through COVID and people were talking about how people were more productive at home than they were at work. And they were happier. And then what happened over the last year, everybody has flipped that. And it's like we now totally mistrust everybody. Don't trust people. You're going to spend all your time shopping or playing golf or doing whatever, and you're never there when I call you. Well, that sounds like it's another problem, right? There's a trust problem there, and there's almost an ego problem there. And if you have people that are doing that, then you have a performance problem. But I don't think you punish everybody for the actions of a few. We took over a contract in Florida when I was with corporate, and they had a very strict policy. Even when there was a hurricane coming in, for my guys not to be in the office, we had to tell them the night before, here's the things I'm going to work on, and here's the deliverables. And I asked him at one point, I said, so then this guy was a retired chief master sergeant, used to work for me. Now he was a GS-14. I was contractor to him. And I said, Mike, why are you so specific on this? He goes, because we used to call the previous contractor and they literally would be on the golf course. I said, well, that won't happen here. And if it does, I'll be taking action against them because that's not the expectation. So I think we've got to have those open communication pieces of what really does this job require? And how can you trust me to get the job done? Build trust. Trust is a huge part of leadership. And then we got to hold people accountable to it, but also let people thrive in that environment. Does that make sense?
Does make sense. And like you said, it is about trust. It's not tarring all your employees with the same brush. I mean, even if you go into the office, I've been in offices where there's people who are lazy, they don't do it, they just do the bare minimum to be seen, to be working. So you get that whether they are under your thumb or whether they're at home, it's going to happen. But it's if you know your employees and if you've worked with people, you get an idea of who they would be. And when I've spoken to people, it's quite often people do know themselves. I've asked, wouldn't you like to work from home? Oh no, I'm not motivated enough. I find I need to come into the office. But for me personally, I'm an introvert and I find an office environment exhausting. So I would rather work from home, but I am self-motivated. I would get on get on with what I needed to do. Most probably, to be
Mhm.
honest, I wouldn't sit at my desk for the full 8 hours solid, but I would
Mhm.
get 8 hours of work in, but I would do it, like you said, in between
Mhm.
putting
Mhm.
washing in the laundry, hanging it up,
Mhm.
going downstairs, making myself a cup of coffee. But the thing is, it's finding that way. But people know,
Yeah.
they know whether they're
Mhm.
motivated or not, or whether they would
Mhm.
get sucked into the sitting and watching TV or not working, because they know that they're not
Mhm.
self-motivated, and they would then, no,
Mhm.
I'd go to the office. Because but also extroverts were like, hell no, don't make me work at home. I want to be in the office. I need to be in the
Mhm.
middle of all
Mhm.
that chaos and all that noise and all that tick tick
Mhm.
tick of keyboards or whatever it is. That's where they
Mhm.
thrive, and then they would, that's where
Mhm.
they would go.
But even then, and I saw this in the military. We would start meetings at 8 and we would run till 5 or 6 at night. And it would be one after another after another. Sometimes we would line them up in the morning and you'd just, okay, now we're ending this meeting, we're going to this meeting. And you almost didn't have time to get up and go to the bathroom. You never took your eye off of, all the people, or if you're sitting in the office, you're staring at the screen. We have learned though that you have to let yourself get up, walk, get the blood flowing, get some exercise, right? Relax the brain from what you're doing. Let your eyes rest for 5 minutes, then you can be more productive. It is a fallacy to think that 8 hours has to be 8 hours on task. Boom, right? It should be that 5 minute trip to the bathroom, 5 minute trip to get to the coffee. Not 5 minutes every 10 minutes, right? You still got to spend 85, 90% of working, but you're right. You do have a lot of people who are always gossiping in the hallways and finding ways to waste time. I had a secretary in Germany. She arranged her computer screen so nobody could see what she was doing, except if they came across the top of the file cabinet. And I had two guys there and they were wondering. So they actually did. And they came and talked to me and said, you need to see what's on her screen. And she spent a lot of the time buying things on Amazon and stuff all day. And then but at 4:30, she would say, oh, I didn't get all this done. I need to work overtime tonight. And she would ask me for another hour. And I'm like, no. That's not the way this works, right? You don't get to approve it by yourself, and you wasted time today, so no. And I was constantly on her. So it kind of created a little conflict, but I was holding her accountable to what the job required. So, so it's a lot of discussion and communication. Yeah, it's good stuff. This is good.
And honestly, like discussion and communication and listening to feedback is not necessarily something that often big corporations are
Mhm.
known for.
That's
Yes,
right.
small startups can be a little bit more agile, a little bit more flexible, but the moment you hit certain threshold, but even with some startups, it comes back to our experience, our mindset, our
Mhm.
leadership skills. And I would love for you to touch a little bit more on then if there's someone listening who is stepping into the leadership, into not only managing people, but leading, be it a
Mhm.
corporation, be it a community. Leader doesn't need to only be in a big corporate organization. We can be leaders
Mhm.
of our own
Mhm.
lives, of our communities or
That's right.
families. What are the skills? What are the, talents that they should nurture? What are the things that a good leader will pay attention to and will try to build up on and embody?
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Another good question. Um, so first of all, you can't give what you don't have, right? You can't expect things from others that you're not exuding. You can, but it's not going to work. You're going to be fake. You're not right. You're not authentic, and people are going to see right through that, right? So if you're going to ask people to trust you, you've got to trust them. We talked about trust as one of those most important things in leadership. You've got to be open and vulnerable. I remember one day I was a group commander and I got to be wing commander, which is very odd because wing commander is the flying guy. It just happened to be that the wing commander and the vice had to be off base, and the two operations group colonels had to be off base. They're the pilot. So I was the next guy. So, but I only got to do this part of the wing commander, right? Anything flying had to be a flyer. But we had a wing safety day that day. And they put me up on this big lift, and I'm 30 feet above everybody, and I'm 500, 600, 800 people, and I'm talking. I said, what can I impart on these guys that they haven't already heard? And I said, you know what? Sometimes you're going to do everything right and things still don't go right. And you have to be willing to admit it. And I said, this is what happened to me Saturday. My son was 3 hours away. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, there in Kansas City. I left at 5 a.m., drove down because my son was bowling. I got there just as he was bowling at 8:30. We spent the whole day together. My other son and I went to a football game with the university that night. We got back at 10 o'clock and I said, I got to drive back home because I got some stuff I got to be at Sunday. My wife was out of town. Well, I had some caffeine, which I don't normally drink, but I was driving and I felt awake and I stopped at the border. I was about an hour away from home. I took a walk, got fresh air, and 20 minutes later I fell asleep. And I woke up as I crossed that rumble strip going into the median, heading toward the other lane. And I was able to swerve it back and get up back on the road. And it scared the daylights out of me. But I told that to 800 people that morning. People are like, I can't believe you were that open and vulnerable. I said, that's the way I am. There's an important lesson there for me. That's an important lesson for you. You could do everything right and still something's going to happen. Now, I started to realize back, I didn't do everything right because I tried to push myself too hard that day, right? I was going on 18, 20, 21 hours, without sleep. And that was my mistake. So I should have just stayed and drove home the next morning, but I didn't. So being open and vulnerable. So building trust, respecting people. Everybody is important in their job. If they're not, they're probably not needed there. So we got to be open and honest about that, right? And it's about the job, not the person. It's about if you don't need somebody doing that job, then you don't need that position. But open, trust, respect, communicate. There should be no reason why you're not talking and understanding. Leaders cast a vision. Leaders see more and they see before other people. That's their job. There was a great movie about the financial crisis in 2008, where the CEO says, I only exist here for one reason, and that's to be looking 3, 6, 9, 12 months out and see what's coming and adjust the direction of the company to make sure we take advantage of that or avoid the risk, right? And we as leaders need to be getting out front of things and thinking, not day-to-day managing our people. So getting out of that micromanagement aspect. Let the mid-level leaders lead. Let people lead themselves, right? Just tell them what you need, let them get out of the way and let them get things done. So don't micromanage people. So I think if we can work on those kind of things as leaders, I think people will be a lot happier in their role, because I know when I was on a podcast yesterday and they asked me what was the toughest challenge. And I had a wing commander who he made me basically coordinate everything my squadron did. And I had 315 people. How can I coordinate everything they're going to do this week with you, right? So I had to pick the right things and move forward. I didn't even know all those things. I just trusted they were getting the right stuff done. The results that I needed is what they were doing. And but boy, he just made life a hell for 9 months, and I just did not enjoy it at all. And I thought that was the end of my career, frankly. But people rescued me and got me to some other assignments, and I made colonel and stayed for 27 years. So that was another 7 years. So, but I think my people saw who I was, and it was interesting. This is the interesting piece of this. This showed me a lot. I got my butt chewed by this new wing commander on my birthday, and I came back to the office. And I called all my flight chiefs together. I said, guys, this is what's happened this week. We've had this mistake, this mistake, this mistake. The boss is really, really upset. He just chewed my butt like I've never had it chewed before in 20 years. I'm surprised I'm still here. My predecessor, got fired. And I don't know if you want me to get fired, but we need to fix this. And we walked through it. And my deputy looked at me and said, sir, is there anything else? And I was kind of like, because I'm sitting here ready to have conversations about how we're going to fix this. And he goes, anything else? I said, no, I think that summarizes it. He says, can we ask you to leave the room? I'm like, I'm the boss here. You're asking me to leave my meeting? And I thought, I trusted him. I trusted him and the people at the table. And I said, sure. And I stood up and they all stood up. I walked out and I understood. He said, Guys, we like this guy. We respect this guy. He's here for us. He took this chewing because we screwed up. We have to fix this. And boy, the next 9 months from working with my team was so great. It was hard to work for the wing commander. It was awesome to work with this team of people who we came together, we bonded, it was just so exciting. I'm going on and on. I'll stop there. But I think when you say what can we be doing, it's those type of leader things. Is we're leaders. Too often, leaders are the best technical person, but they've never had any training in leadership. But they should be getting training all along because you're training yourself, right? You talked it earlier, accountability, managing my time, how I deal with people, how I respect people, how I trust people. I'm building all those things. So when I now move to that new position, it's not a huge change. It's just a different responsibility.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head with that story. Is leaders don't like to show vulnerability. They got to show that they stay, well, I'm the leader, therefore. And quite often, and I've come across a lot of them, is, as you said, you had your butt chewed by your I think wing commander, or your butt chewed
Wing
by the
commander.
guy above you.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of people will do is they will then chew everybody else's butt, because that's I've had it, and now I'm going to chew everybody else because I'm embarrassed, or I'm ashamed, or no, it wasn't me, and pass the buck. So they will then chew everybody else's out, so it goes down. But by you sharing, is, listen, this has happened to me, I didn't like it. So you showed vulnerability because you showed that you also get your butt chewed, and but you shared that with your team, and they then make the choice: do we keep him, or do we find now we know how to get rid of him? Okay, let's start
They could have
doing
made that
shoddy
choice, couldn't
work.
they?
But the thing is, I think as a leader, it's fine, it's taking the slack from the one above, taking their butt chewing, but not passing it on, and finding a way to say, listen guys, this has happened, how can we fix it, or what can we do? And like you said, you then had that trust when they said, sir, leave the room, and leaving the room. I mean, I'm trying to picture some of the managers that I've worked for, and I'm like, yeah, will you leave the room? This is your meeting, but will you leave? I mean, it was like, no, you leaving the room. It's quite something to find that right balance. And I think that story really shows how, as you said, leaders do lead from the front, but they also have to be a little bit behind as well, and to help to motivate, to push, to find that right balance. But you don't lead through micromanaging. And you also brought that in when you had that person who, you had to know exactly what 365 or 15 people are doing exactly, and how you can't micromanage. It takes a hell of a lot of energy on yourself, but it doesn't instill trust. And it's really finding that balance, because you want to be friends, but you've also got to be a leader. So it's how do you find
a tough balance,
that balance on being there and being the friend, but also being the boss and being the leader that you want to be, and just finding that right way is to allow your staff to have a laugh and a joke, but not allow it to be that's all that they're doing, and they just slacking off because you're not really paying attention, or you're too relaxed.
It's a great segue into this story. As I was getting ready, this was about 3 to 4 years before I was that squadron commander, and I was interviewing on the phone for positions. And the common question I got, which I thought was really weird, was, can you be mean? And the first time I got that question, I was like dumbfounded. It's like, what kind of question is that? Is that what this entails? Right? And it goes back to what you just said, right? If other people chew, Me, I have to pass it on. If I see something wrong, I have to get on somebody. I have to be behind them, kicking them to make them work harder. Well, I tell you, when people kick me, I don't work harder. And I don't think most people work harder. So I thought about it real quick and I said, yes, sir, I can be mean. It's not a tool. It is a tool in my toolbox. It's not one that I use a lot, but I can give you some examples of when I've used it and I've used it effectively because it's certain circumstances. But I'm a motivator. I inspire people. I build trust and respect. And when I ask them to do things, ask them to do things, they want to get them done because they have pride in what they're doing. I don't have to shame them into it by being mean and kicking them. I didn't get any of those jobs. but I was comfortable with that answer, right? And I when I go back to self-awareness, now I'm exploring myself. And I was like, that is who I am. I have very rarely used the mean card, the directive conversation. It's much more of a participative. And I lead from listening, asking, and then giving direction. But I'm usually asking, hey, can I get you to do this? Hey, I need you to, when can you get this done? Right. And I see here's a problem here. And when I'm not getting response, then I'll turn around to, hey, there's something going around here. I asked you to do this, but I'm not seeing you getting it done. Is it unclear what I was looking for? Was there something else in the way? Um, and then it's a conversation. And at some point, I may have to get directive, but I've given them the opportunity up front to make it happen on their own.
And I do
Mhm.
think that it's, so important to recognize that maybe there was a reason for you not getting those jobs, that you would not necessarily be happy in those jobs. And it's so, unfortunately, yes, we live in a world where we sometimes say yes to job
Mhm.
opportunities because we, again, feel like we have to. There is a raise of money and we want more money, or we
Mhm.
simply desperately need a job to be able to pay
Mhm.
for,
Mhm.
our living or have a security. But
Mhm.
we sometimes we don't have a choice and it's hard. But often we do have a choice, but we don't pay enough
Mhm.
attention to what really matters to us. Is it really
Mhm.
more money? Is it more, having
Mhm.
the title, really knowing ourselves, what fits our personality, what fits our motivation, what energizes us? And then we feel trapped and then we go down a spiral of just mental health issues, anxiety,
Mhm.
depression, or we talk a lot on this podcast with then any kind of a mental suppressed emotions become a physical. Then we get, chronic diseases, with autoimmune diseases. We get all sorts of things just because we wanted more money, we wanted more prestige, we just followed the path. That's how always been done. This is how my
Mhm.
parents, my peers, they're climbing the ladder, so I'm gonna do that as well. So is there something that you could then share with our listeners if they feel in this position that they
Mhm.
don't have a choice, that, or they feel trapped and they don't know how to get out of the rat race, from the cycle of,
Mhm.
am I able of doing something else? How will I support myself?
Mhm.
How do I find out what really gives me the butterflies? How do you help people who feel
Mhm.
like this?
Mhm. That's a good question. I'm going to go ahead. I was going to bring this book up, E-Myth Revisited. It's why most small businesses don't work and what can you do about it? Now he's talking about small businesses, but I think there's a chapter in here that really relates to what we're talking about. And I was just looking it up. It's chapter 12, your primary aim. And he says, before you figure out what business you want to start, as an owner, you need to figure out what you want your life to look like. Right? What are the things that you want? How, like my predecessor, do you want to work 7 days a week, 12, 18 hours a day, and not have a family and not have kids and not have friends and not have, not go to the gym? Or do you want that harmony? Because balance is tough. You want that harmony where I work 8 to 10 hours. I work hard, but then I get to go home and I get to be at home with my wife for dinner. I get to be with my kids in their activities, sports, drama, music, whatever it is. My kids had all of those. And I was trying to always be there for those. And then I want to get to the gym every day. I'm a gym junkie. I almost got kicked out of the Air Force on my third day for being overweight, which was interesting because I lost an inch flying from Milwaukee to San Antonio, but which which gave me 6 less pounds on my max. But anyway, I had to totally change around my diet, and it has affected me 42 years later, almost 43. So understanding your primary aim of who you are, it goes back to that self-awareness thing, but I use the wheel of life, and you have pie slices in your wheel. And those are, spiritual, physical, relationships, financial, professional. There could be others. You can have 5 slices, 6, 8 slices, whatever is important to you. But you rate yourself on where you are against where you want to be. Not, as you said, I think earlier, it was either Linka or Natalie, I'm not sure which of you said, but don't compare yourself to others, right? You should. Don't should all over yourself. What do I want, right? I want to be able to play with my name, Don Gleason. Don Gleason, want to be able to be strong enough and fit enough that I can get on the floor and play with my grandkids. I want to have the physical strength and the stamina to do that. In 3 weeks, we're going to be out in Arizona playing with my 5-year-old grandson, while my son and his husband go off for a couple of days, and that's going to take stamina, right? I want to be financially able at age 65, where I'm at now, to be able to go travel and do things. We're going to Alaska in June. We're hoping to go to Europe for Chris Kendall markets, across a number of countries with my daughter in December, right? So to be able to do those things. We're going to take a trip camping this summer for 30 days up into Utah. I've always wanted to go there. So next summer, we're hoping to take 30 days on a Euro pass. So thinking about all those different pieces, because what we normally do is we think it's all about the work. And I think directly to answer your question, when you know your primary aim, Darren Hardy said this week, he's got a daily 5-minute podcast he puts out, a thought piece. And he said, you need to make the one big decision that makes the 100 other decisions are almost non-essential, right? Once I decide that this is the life I want with the primary aim, when all of a sudden the boss comes in and says, I need you to work 7 hours, 7 days, 8 hours, 18 hours a day for the next 6 months to get this job done, you're going to decide, no, I'm not. That's not the life I want. I'm going to go look for elsewhere. And you don't get forced into it. And I think there's also a number of books. Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil, Wallace D. Wattles, Science of Getting Rich. There's another one, I can't think of the author, but Essentialism. And it talks about really being clear on what you want in life, right? Like you decided, I'm going to be in a van, enjoying life, touring Europe, meeting new people, and I will get my job done amongst that, right? That's what my daughter's doing. So now all of a sudden somebody says, you got to come back to the office and work full time again. She's like, no, I'm not going to do that. This is what I want. So I think knowing this, your primary aim sets you up for everything else to be able to make those decisions. And I think, so we as leaders now, let me jump back to something. We as leaders have to understand our people from a generation perspective, right? You go back to baby boomers, where I'm at. I'm at the end of the baby boomers. we were glad to have a job. We stayed in one job. We did what was asked of us. We didn't necessarily pay attention to ourselves. Our kids, all 3 of mine are millennials, they saw that and said, no, that's not for me. Yeah, I like that, Linka. You're right. It's not for me. I'm going to do it differently. And now even the Generation Z are even more so. Now the baby boomers are looking at the younger generation and saying, you don't want to work. Well, when we go back and look at that, you don't want to work in the jobs that I had, right? I worked in gas stations and retail stores and all those things, might get my way through college. You found other jobs that you can do to bring in more money than minimum wage, like I was working on, much more fulfilling, much more free to my time, right? It doesn't mean you're not working hard, it just means you're working differently. So we as leaders have to understand our people. Now, it doesn't mean that at a manufacturing company, when it's, we have 3 shifts and they're 8 to 4, 4 to midnight, midnight to 8, that people start arriving late and stuff like that. No, there's constrictions on the job, but you should know that going in. And if it doesn't work for you, having the courage I saw in 3 podcasts back, one of your, where it's just the two of you talking. I was listening to that this morning, and it said, got to have the courage to take action. And when you see that that job is not what you're looking for, you have to have the courage to say, this is not for me. Now, I I did 3.5 years traveling 90% of the time. I would literally leave on Sunday afternoon, get back Thursday or Friday, hopefully, because there's always aircraft problems and weather problems. And there was times where I would have to spend up in Tennessee 3 or 4 weeks in a row when I planned to come home every week because I couldn't get home. And or I mean, I'd get back Saturday night and leave out on Sunday, and I was like, that makes no sense, right? And other things were happening. It clicked one night. I said, I'm done. I am done with this job. So I talked to my boss the next day and I said, somewhere in the next 6 months, I'm going to resign from this, not from my company, but from this job. And I'm looking for a new job, and I want to give you heads up that this is time for you to start looking for somebody to replace me. And we had a good conversation. And I had that courage to stand up and say, I need to change. I didn't just walk in and say, I'm done, and walk out the door. Give him no time. I didn't give him 2 weeks. I gave him 6 months. And it was a nice, smooth transition. And I got to hire the guy that was on my team, hire him to replace me, and he got promoted twice in the next year to take that job. And he's a stud. He's awesome, right? So, sorry, long answer.
Well, it's as you said, it is about having the courage, but it's also is because something's not right for you. It doesn't mean that there's not somebody who that would be right for. Like you said, your
That's
guy
right.
got promoted twice in a year because it wasn't right for you, but it was obviously something that was right for him. And it's having as the person saying, this isn't right for me, I need to make a change. But it's also for the person on the other end receiving that is also having the courage to think, okay, because it's not right for Don, but maybe it'd be okay for Joe Smith, and he this will work for him. And it's finding the right people for the right roles. But as you said, it's knowing yourself. It's knowing about who you are. And one of the things that you mentioned very in the beginning was this disc, and you said that you're an SC. So I know a little bit about disc, and I think Lenka knows a little bit about disc. But can you share a little bit about what is disc?
Sure.
What is SC?
Yeah.
Because for our audience, because as you said, it's about getting to know who you are, and that might be a way that they can start to learn about themselves, as well as, I mean, those are really great books that you mentioned. Link and I are big bookworms. So yes, I've read most of the books that you mentioned. So the thing is what is DISC, and how can people utilize that to find out a little bit more about who they are so that they can start to understand themselves better?
Yeah, and there are a number of different DISC assessments. Different companies look at it a little bit differently, but it's all based upon work by Dr. William Marston back in the 1930s at Harvard. He did his doctoral thesis on how can I categorize people's personality in kind of buckets that make sense. And then when I understand them, I can relate to them in the way they like to be communicated to. And he went back actually 2,000 years. It was like 500 BC, so 2,500 years. So it's 1930 back to 500 BC. And he started looking at all the ways that they had done it in the past. He pulled all that together and he created a scientific algorithm to be able to categorize it with a questionnaire to be able to figure out buckets. And the 4 buckets he came up with are D, I, S, and C. D's are about 3% of the population. They're directive. They're dominant. They like to be in charge. They're focusing in on results. They're task-oriented and outgoing. So when you think about the D, I, S, and C, one side is people task-oriented, one side is people-oriented, one side is outgoing, one side is reserved. So D's are outgoing and task-oriented. They don't relate well with people. And the higher they are, they're more focused on results and less focused on people. So understand that gives you some feeling how you communicate with them, right? It's like that's 3%. The I's are outgoing but people-oriented. They call them influential. They're really good talkers. salespeople, business development people, um, people who think fast on their feet. They love to interact. They have to speak to think. I think that was the important thing for me. There's 11% of the people. So you can see now only 14% of the people are outgoing. The rest are reserved. So they have to um, speak to think. Where C's, their diagonal opposite, think before they speak. I'll come back to that. And I's are very random in how they do things. They don't like to-do lists. They don't like this list of things that they have to get done. They just go out and do things. A lot of times they'll get a bunch of those to-do list things done, but it's not on the list. They're not checking it off. The S's are steady and stable. They're the heartbeat of most organizations. They're people-oriented, but reserved. So they're the ones who don't need to be out in front, don't need to be in charge, but they're organizing teams and they're forming collaborations and groups to get things done. They're in charge of their little piece and they make things happen. They're, like I said, the heartbeat of an organization. They are 67% of the population. So a big part of the population, but they're slow to change. They don't like change. They can change if you help them through the process, understand it, but you have to communicate and work with them. You can't just walk in and say, hey, we're going 90 degrees different today. This is it. Get on board. That's just not going to work for them. And they resist conflict. They don't like that conflict. Like we said earlier, when I was talking to the gentleman and said, hey, you're not getting this done. What's going on? They would be very uncomfortable asking that question. But here I am an S, right? So I should be in that group. I'll come back to that. So what that means is, let me address it. What that means is you can adjust, not necessarily your personality, but how you play into that personality. I know that I have to be able to show respect and trust with people. I have to be able to communicate with them. So I get over my resistance to conflict and have that conversation. I've learned how to do it, right? So I don't have to be mean. I don't have to just come and say, you're not getting it done, you're fired. It's not going to do anybody any good, right? So I've learned how to do that. And then the C's are 17% of the population. They are the task-oriented, reserved people. They're very analytical. A lot of times you're scientists, you're detail-oriented folks, you're accountants, you're bankers. They love numbers. They love spreadsheets, right? They love getting into things and figuring things out and solving problems. They love to-do lists. They think before they speak. Like I said, the opposite of the I's. Example for me was in fourth grade, my parent-teacher conference, the teacher said, Don has great ideas. He needs to speak up more. He's always so quiet. Well, my mom would look at me and say, you need to speak up more. And she'd go away. Nobody asked me why I don't speak up more. Nobody understood me as a C. So what's happening in my mind, as I understood later, was I'm listening to the question, I'm thinking through the answer, I'm hearing what people are saying, and then I'm finally gaining the confidence to say something, raise my hand, and the teacher says, well, the next question is, and we're off and Don starts all over again, thinking through the question, what's the right answer? What do people think? Are they going to think of me bad? And I'm ready, and off they're off to question 3, and I'm like always behind, right? So that's the C, thinking before they speak. So teachers, man, if you could understand who your people are, you got to get the I's to stop speaking so much, cut them off, to give time for the C's and ask them the question, invite them into the conversation, right? There are ways when you're speaking in front of an audience, when you're doing training with an audience, when you're doing coaching, if you understand that personality, you can bring them into the conversation, capture their personality, and help them feel more comfortable. Sorry, long answer.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And you've described it in a really succinct and nice way. And I think if you want to be a manager or a leader or in any form where you've got to have subordinates or working with others, it should be mandatory to do these tests to see so that you do understand yourself, but B is your people that you're working with. Can you imagine an I and a C having a conversation? I think it would be an I having a conversation and the C just sitting there going, what the hell just happened?
Mhm.
So it's about
Mhm.
finding those balances. So thank you. You've really
No, you're welcome.
shared
Yeah.
that in
I
in a beautiful way.
I do want to emphasize that it's an assessment, not a test, right? There is no right or wrong answer. Every personality is a beautiful personality because it's their personality and they need to live into it. And it's all about uncovering who you are, how you need to communicate, how you like to lead people, how you like to be led and communicated to, right? It's just an assessment of who you are. There's no right or wrong.
No, thank you for that, and
Mhm.
letting our listeners know. I couldn't think of the word, so test came
Mhm.
out. But no,
Yeah,
it's right.
yeah.
It is an assessment, and there is no right
Mhm.
or wrong answer. It is about who you are, and
Mhm.
we're not wrong. We're not designed wrong. We're not wrong. We're
Mhm.
just different and unique. So thank you,
Mhm.
and for sharing
Yeah.
all that.
I had bosses come to me at one point and said, why are you this way? Why don't you do this? It's kind of like, can you be mean, right? Why can't you lead this way? Because it's not me. It doesn't mean that I had to be a D to be an effective commander. I commanded 3 squadrons, a group. I led a team of 400 doing the Iraq reconstruction out of Baghdad. I led teams of 60 people doing cost efficiencies for the Department of Energy. I've led teams, and I'm a very low D. I'm a SC, right? But the collaboration, the teamwork works for me, and I become a good leader, and my people respect that. They've told me that.
Hop on to our Patreon account to get this episode's amazing and wonderful gold nugget. So if people want to connect with you or find ways to reach out, to have a conversation with you,
Mhm.
whatever they feel that they need, how do people find you?
So 2 ways. One is my website, Achieve New Heights altogether.com, achievenewheights.com. And second way is get on LinkedIn and look up Don, middle initial L for Leonard, Lima, whatever. Leonard is the middle name, but L and Gleason, Gleason. And I'm the only one with the middle initial. There's like 67 Don Gleasons of some form, but only one with a middle initial L. And send me a note, connect with me, and say, hey, I heard you here on the Into Your Life podcast with Natalie and Linka, and I would like to have a conversation. I always offer a 30-minute complimentary conversation. Do you just want to talk? You want to clarify something that we said? You want to give me some input on things? I would love it. If I can serve you in any way, I will do that. You will get something out of it. And if you want to work together going forward, we can talk about that too, but there's no pressure. But it's just about how I can serve people. I'm at that point in life where I just love helping people find that best life. This is a perfect podcast for me.
Brilliant. And all the
Mhm.
links will be in the description so people
Mhm.
can click on the links if they don't want to
Mhm.
type it in, which is fine. But thank you so much. I mean, we
Mhm.
could just talk hours, especially about leadership and
Yep.
vulnerability and courage and all of this. But thank you
Mhm.
for
You're
sharing your
welcome.
time with us, sharing your enthusiasm with us and your stories. It's been great to get to know you a little bit and to hear of your experiences and the stories that you shared. I mean, they're a lot of fun, especially the chewing the butt. I like that one.
It wasn't
But
enjoyable, but I learned a lot from it.
oh, I'm sure. But thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. We really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
or your morning and our late afternoon. And for our listeners, what have you got from today? What aha moments have resonated with you? Are you in a leadership position? Do you want to step into a leadership position? Or is leadership you thinking, I ain't doing that. That's not for me. And all of those are fine. But how do you feel about vulnerability? How do you feel about the leaders in your life? Or have you heard or thinking about or have done the DISC assessment? All of these things. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what have you got from today's episode. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.